since we've been privileged enough to be invited to play a lot of gigs together.
Yeah.
I remember this other event we did not too long ago. This was, what, 8 years ago? When we had a gig at in San Francisco, which first had to do with the presentation in the afternoon.
Oh, right, yeah.
For Red Bull Music Academy, and we actually were treated to an incredible performance by none other than one of the absolute geniuses and early pioneers of electronic music, Morton Subotnick. So, I will readily admit that this was my first time actually seeing somebody who knew what they were doing using a Buchla. Now, are you driven towards that, or?
No.
Okay, why?
Not at all.
I mean, you have to admit that what we saw that day was...
Yes. Right. I feel that people who are Buchla players are Buchla players. That's all that you should play. It's so complex. And, you know, from how I analyzed what he was doing, that you can't just pick up a Buchla and do it in 2 hours. You know, that's like years and years and years of work.
I mean, I couldn't even begin to comprehend what he was doing, because some of the modules he was using in there, I had never seen. So, like, something like an uncertainty generator.
Right,
like,
okay. Yeah.
And so that day, I remember after the Morton Subotnick performance, you also did a demonstration of your own, which was more trying to show people how you approach building patches, was it?
Yes, right. We were using a Moog Voyager for that one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you still pretty much go about it the same way you did back then?
Yeah, so when I learned how to make sounds, I learned on the Mini Moog. And the Mini Moog was important because it had no patches in it. So you always had to start from scratch. That's just the way it was, you know.
Sure.
Unless you just had a Mini Moog that was supposed to be a horn sound, you know. Then you just move it a little bit. You never really, you know, you have to have you could write down the patches and stuff, but it was just kind of better if you left it where it was, and that's going to be your horn one, or that's going to be the bass, or that's going to be whatever.
Right.
So, and the instructor that I had came from the classical world. So his view of how to program was based on making natural sounds, natural sounds from a synthetic machine.
Yes.
That was the idea. When I came around, you know, my logic and of everyone else that I know wasn't to make things sound like, you didn't want it to sound like a Fender bass. You just wanted it to sound like a hot bass line. You wanted the bass to sound good, you know?
Yeah.
It didn't have to sound like a Fender bass. It didn't have to, oh yeah, I want to make a sound that sounds like a Stradivarius, you know? No, you know, I want something that's kind of string sound, and then, you know, you put a processor on it and then it makes it into strings, you know? That was the logic. So, but by being instructed by this guy, I learned a lot of how to envision things than if I would have taught myself how to do it.
Right.
So one thing that he talked about a lot was drum programming. So I would program something on drums, and he's like, no drummer could ever play that.
Oh, you mean he kind of felt that somehow when you do your drum programming, you should still try to emulate some sense of reality for listeners.
Exactly, because a real drummer is not going to play 16ths on the cymbal and 16ths on the hi-hat at the same time, with being able to, you know, do a pattern on his kick, you know, and everything, you know, like make it realistic, you know.
Right.
And that always stayed with me in how I program, you know. I'm still not going to program something to sound like a Fender bass, but, you know, I'm going to still think of what he said and then come back and to say, okay, you know, maybe there's something about it that's just not in there that needs to be in there. And with drum programming, making it simpler, and most of the records that I love anyway have simple drum patterns.
But
anyway,
I noticed, like, say, in some of the records that you made that I really like,
yeah,
you seem to really place an emphasis sometimes on tweaking certain sounds that have that sort of effect that happens when two different waveforms are beating against each other, like a ring modulator type of thing, and like, say, in Sandstorms, had in the solos, it's like, it's like, you consciously try to go towards that, or it just happens as you're programming the patch?
It happens, but that's the improvisation that's important to me for music.
What instrument did you use to do that solo in Sandstorms?
I think that might have been an ATC-1.
With all analog controls and everything?
Yeah. ATC-1 only had one knob, but you press what parameter you want that one knob to control. I think that was the ATC-1, because I used to use ATC-1 a lot back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that the modern tools that we have at our disposal today, and I'm not talking about preset libraries, I'm saying building sounds from scratch pretty much.
Yeah.
Do you feel that when you go at least virtual, some of these tools have altered the way you approach synthesis?
No, because I don't like going too complex. I
Right.
like it to be simple.
Sure.
You know? So I'm always looking for things to be simple. So like an example of a processor that is simple is like the Waves 1 knob, or you know, whatever it is. So it just turn a knob and you get something, and that's what I look for from synthesizers and plugins, because in VSTs, because I've got all the ones that are super complex, and it's like I don't like it. I just want to have something that I can, you know, turn real quick or assign something, and then I can use it, and then it just is, you know. Because when it gets all complex, if I had a studio full of musicians and we're sitting in there the whole day twiddling knobs, you know, just jerking around and stuff, you don't get anything from it. It's just a bunch of people just like, oh yeah, guess what I can get, you know, guess what I can do with this.
Do you find yourself using newer synthesizers like Massive and pieces like that?
I have all that stuff.
Or Zebra?
I didn't really get into Zebra. I'm not interested in Zebra. I actually like they have a simpler one called Ace.
Okay, but that's the company called Yuhi.
Yuhi, yeah.
I like Zebra though. I mean, Diva is a bit complicated for me. I don't.
You think Diva's less complicated than Zebra is?
Yeah.
Because Zebra is supposed to be based off modular.
Well, Zebra 2 actually is the one I use. But
Yeah.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm just curious on how these new in-the-box digital creation of plugins,
Yeah.
virtual instruments, have modified your approach to, you know, how you create.
I can't say
sound.
that they've modified it. I would have to say they've hindered me more than anything.
Well, you could always find plugins that have nice basic sounds. Like, don't you have one that does Roland Juno 106 or something like that?
Of course, I have the Roland Cloud one, so which is the actual Roland Juno 106. But I have a 106 in the corner as well. You know.
Yeah. Oh, me too.
I put, you know, I had even with synthesizers, I had two OB6s.
Right.
And one of them I just got rid of and pulled out my Prophet 600, and now that's in its place. And you know, so that's like that kind of thing for me, where I'm looking for that familiarity now, that I can just do it instead of, you know, jerking around trying to cut off the effects, or jerking around trying to do, you know, get it to modulate or another way or whatever. I'm not really thinking like that. I'm thinking like, you know, I'm thinking like Hendrix when he was playing. I'm not thinking like Robert Fripp, you know, where you got to put effects on everything and trying to make the sounds all, you know, do whatever it's going to do. I'm thinking like, okay, you plug it into an amp, you might have a wah on it, and then you just kill it, you know?
I mean, okay, from my perspective, even though I do work in the box most of the time,
yeah, when
it comes to generating synthetic sounds, there's no question that I feel with certain pieces there's no equivalent that I know that is giving me the same amount of stimuli. I think for my I'm going to give you 3, so it's going to be my top 3 in reverse order.
Okay.
Juno 106 is not part of that list because I think the Juno is just like you can't get rid of it. It's everywhere you want it to be. Actually, I'm sorry. The Juno 60 is what I kept.
Okay.
Because the Juno 60 has that special bass sound. But besides that, so in reverse order, the Memory Moog.
Beast.
Because it has this incredible filter sound and so fat and so thick, and the attack, everything about it is just right.
Yeah.
Then number 2, Roland MKS 80 Super Jupiter with programmer.
Yeah.
Okay, because again it has like some things that I could do with it. I can do all kinds of tricks with system exclusive, controlling the parameters in real time. I've done. So what's my number 1 then? Sorry, it's the ARP 2600.
Oh. Of course. Okay.
I'm just so addicted to that box. I was lucky enough to buy one for very cheap in 1990, and I've kept it all these years. And I have to say, perhaps more so than the Mini Moog, I think this is the one thing that has the most personality that I ever use. Like whenever I use it in a track, you could tell, oh. And I think Todd Terje is the same way. He swears by his ARP 2600. I think actually a whole bunch of the records that he did, like that DeLorean record and all that, were exclusively done with ARP sounds. But you don't have one of those?
No, I never bought a 2600.
I tell you, if you're going to make an investment one day, like you feel like, oh, Elon Musk or something, and you're willing to blow some money, because right now they cost a lot.
They cost way too much for those things.
But that is really a piece that's worth having.
Right.
And the one that I'm not talking about, because I don't own it, but I like what you can do with it for sound design, is that Suitcase AKS Synthy, but that one is also ridiculously priced.
It's very expensive.
You can, every time I would go to Florian's house, he knew in advance. So when I arrived at his house, the AKS was on the desk, because he knew I wanted to record it. And I'd spend hours making like all these crazy, wacky sounds with it that you know, you just take later and you edit. But so you find yourself doing that sometimes, that you actually spend time in front of the synthesizer, not really with any kind of battle plan, but just trying to get sounds and make soundscapes happen?
I always had a sequencer involved somehow. So there was always some type of note generation that had to come through. Because by me just, you know, if I'm playing chords or something, then that's cool. But to have a sequencer there, it helped me develop the idea of the sound that I wanted to get a bit
so is that a standalone sequencer or in the computer?
I mean, if we're talking in the past, it would be like a MMT8, Elise's MMT8.
Oh, wow. Okay, we're going back.
Yeah, you know, so that was MMT8 and a Prophet 600. That was my first setup.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, and then after that, I went into, it's funny actually, after that, I went into Mac and was using... So
this is OS 7 or something like that?
You know, I had a Mac Classic, you know,
Performer.
I was using Performer.
Right.
Or and then, Vision? Of course, after that, no, never Vision. And then after that was MPC 3000. So I went I was out of the box and went in the box for sequencing, and then came back out of the box again.
All right.
And then now we're back in the box with you know, Ableton and Logic and all that. Yeah. And sometimes I have to go back to the MPC because, you know, sometimes if something's not quite working, I'll go and put it in MPC and then remix it in MPC to get the feel that I really want. You know, I haven't done that in a while, but
Damn.
You know, sometimes it just gets to that point where you just have to kind of remix your remix, you know, and I did that with remixes a lot where it just wasn't quite getting there, and just put it in MP and then you get the vibe, you know, boom. There you go.
You re-trigger, you resample and chop up everything,
Yeah.
and re-trigger it and rearrange it by writing a sequence in the MPC.
Yeah. So like with that falling up thing I did for Theo, you know, it started in Logic, and then I ended up resampling everything into the MPC, and then that was it. That was it. What you hear is coming straight from the MPC.
So the final result had nothing to do with what you originally set out to do. That was almost like an intermediate step.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, by me having 3 separate computers, it makes sense to me, because
They each have their own interface?
yeah, I use them all separately. I don't have them. I can, of course, I could tie them all in to trigger each other, however, but Air is like composition, start out composition, boom,
Right.
have machine hooked up to it, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Get it to that point, save the audio, save the files, and then put it in the next computer, finish it up,
Right.
and then put it into the mix computer and then mix it, you know. And then by doing that too, it feels like, because I don't think a lot of people understood that there was a point in making a record where you would use multiple studios to make one song. You use one studio for getting some type of feel, and then you go somewhere else, and then you might be able to get that sound from it, or, you know, however it happens, and then it all goes to the mix engineer, and then you have that final thing.
Right.
And that's how I'm looking at it. Like, this is my bedroom, you know, this is where I'm composing. This is me going into a proper studio with the Pro, and then, you know, MacBook Pro, and then I'm in the proper studio.
Right.
This is going to the mix studio. So the mix studio is the final step. You know, so if I was doing mastering, I would have another computer that would be specifically mastering. So that would probably be the Radar to do that.
And do you? I guess you do keep in touch with both Mark Ernestus and Moritz Von Oswald, right?
Yes.
So, have you actually collaborated on anything with Moritz recently?
Moritz and I have been working on a record for about 100 years.
Because I guess, and I was very privileged to be able to interview him right before the start of lockdown. I haven't published that interview yet, but it was actually really fascinating because he explained a lot of things to me which I didn't really understand about what he loves about, like, say, for example, musique concrète, or like all these different kinds of electronic music that, you know, people don't really know he's so into. But I was like amazed that he is so fascinated by ring modulators and all these special synth, you know, modules, processors and things like that. So when you're collaborating, how does it work? You send him music, he adds parts, and he sends it back to you?
No, we were meeting up until the pandemic.
Right.
So we would have our meetings. He'd come to Detroit and sit on the sofa.
Yeah.
And listen to. He loves the PMCs, and you just sit
Right.
there and just listen to the PMCs, and we mess around and go to the other room and have some coffee, and you know, and
You work at his house sometimes?
yeah.
I love the studio so much.
His studio is very comfortable. Yeah. So he, but we would have we'd have session, and then like at his house, we would go to the living room and listen to records. You know, so we come up and eat, go to the living room, listen to records, and say, "Oh, you gotta hear, you know, this Tony Williams thing, or you have to hear this, or you have to hear that." And it's like, you know, so it was a lot of fun to be able to do those things, because Moritz is my brother, and but we have this love that is like this, not only a musical brother love, but just we're in love with each other.
Oh.
So I really enjoy my time.
I so feel you.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Because there's things that people try to fight, and love is one of those things that a lot of people try to fight.
Right.
We use love, we use hate, we use all these things, like, throwing anything in the air and stuff. But really, you can love your best friend so much that it might even be a deeper love than you might have for your wife or your husband, because you just have that love for that person. And my love for Moritz isn't deeper than my love for my wife, but my love for Moritz is like, wow, I mean, there's like Moritz, Derek, I mean, those are guys I see all the time, and right. It's just like so deep, and my love for you is so deep.
But this is bringing us back to what I wanted to talk about before, which was this absolutely stunning initiative, which I must say, when I visited Mark Ernestus at his home, when the year where he started his workshop downstairs, he had that little studio, and he started showing me the drafts for this console. I mean, that was really thinking big. So for those who don't know what we're talking about, this is a console manufacturing, console building initiative project where they contacted someone, a company in Germany,
Zähl,
right, who agreed to do a custom, short, limited run, bespoke version of a console design that has never been done before, right?
Yes, true.
So the way I understand it, the console has a classic inline section where there's, EQs, buses, panning, and all the other sundries and assorted niceties that an analog console has. But then there's a separate section on the side which has something that allows for signal flow to happen within the console, and that routes to processors which are purely CV and gate processing.
Well, that's the new module that came in. So originally, I
had never seen that in a console before.
Yes.
I think this is so exciting that you're at the console and suddenly you're going to be able to manipulate CV and gate. I want to hear more about it, please.
Yes. So
please, you saying that this is your idea?
To put the CV, it was my idea, and I don't know if he had already thought of it before,
right?
But why it came to me was I was looking at the back of an Eventide 949,
right,
that had
control
CV
voltage,
controls on the back. Like, that was the first time I had ever seen anything like that. And I'm thinking, like, people were using this in pro audio back in the 80s, late 70s and early 80s, in order to change programs, in order to change program numbers or whatever.
Oh, no. There were things where you could control parameters. They were more sophisticated.
So it was.
I mean, like, say, when you take a Lexicon Primetime 2, if you look in the back, it has like at least 3 different CV inputs. And I could tell you a whole bunch of other things that have that too. But go on.
Because I don't have the Primetime 2. I have the Primetime, and the Primetime doesn't have that. But and the Super Primetime was the one I really wanted. They have one.
Well, they're still available. You can find them.
They're cool, but they break down.
$1,400.
They break down.
Or 2,000, but
breaks down too much for me.
Okay, the thing about the Super Primetime, remember, it has those presets that you could switch as a performance thing, and you can switch between presets, and the sound carries through without muting.
Okay.
So you can perform with a Super
Fantastic.
Primetime. Oh, go on.
So
anyway,
so the Zähl console, when I saw the back of the 949, it just really clicked, because I was already using modular.
Right.
And I said, you know, with the Schwayman, the small Schwayman modular as well,
Right.
mixer as well that has CV and pan on it.
Right.
It's like, Mark, well, you know, you have to put CV on there, especially coming from Berlin, and there's all these people that are using modular stuff that's coming from Germany. It just makes sense because you're making you're technically making a crazy ass keyboard mixer. You know, it's not set up like a recording mixer. It's you can use it as a mixer, a mixer for the mix, but it's basically a synthesizer mixer.
So your idea was to create this section in the console in order to allow it to interface to modular?
Yes. Yes.
So it's all the normal plus 5 volt control voltage standard, then, not the core.
I guess it is.
Right.
The technical things you can talk to me. I'm an idealist.
Right,
I'm an idea guy. But so the idea was that you can control the you could do like what I said with the Schwayman with the PH4,
right,
and change the phase of the panning. You know, so that was really what motivated me in that direction of that it can integrate with modulars. You can use whatever you want to. And then it developed into there being a filter that is CV modulated as well. And they built a filter module.
In that channel.
In a channel. So you can buy it as a separate channel. And they went through a few different people to try to do it, because I think the original idea, because I love Schwayman, they went to Schwayman, it didn't really work out with Schwayman, and then they went to Shipman, and then it didn't really work out with Shipman either,
right,
and then Mark ended up designing it himself and did a really excellent job at designing.
Wow.
And Mark is like, I love that guy. He's just like such a sweet guy. He thinks about everything he's gonna say before he says it. Like, I think he's because he takes about 30 seconds,
Doesn't
45
matter.
seconds.
It's
before
worth
he actually
the wait.
It's worth it, and then he like goes into it, and it's like, okay, you know, it really makes sense. Smart, wonderful man, but he really is showing like his powers in design. You know,
have these consoles started to being produced?
They've been produced for years now. So, shoot, who had the first one?
I mean, he said there were a lot of orders. That much I remember.
There's some in the U.S. now.
But you don't have one yet.
I didn't get mine yet because I was waiting for the filter to be done.
Right.
You know, so I gave the money as a deposit. I just haven't agreed on taking delivery yet.
But if you're gonna have this console, what would you do with it? How would that completely change your studio, and you'd have to put
it will go back into having a solid console again.
So right now you don't have an analog console.
No, I have the SSL summing.
Okay, but when you do recording, what do you use for input?
Okay.
Just through the app Apollo?
I have some API mic pre's that are patched into the patch bay that can go into the Apollo. I have a little keyboard mixer, a GL2, Allen Heath GL2.
Oh, so you use submixers.
So I can use that. That's like where all the synthesizers are plugged into. And also I have an old AMEC BC2, which is a broadcast console. 16
channel, is it?
This one is 12.
Okay.
But what was cool about the BC2 is that it has a button that you could change it from stereo to mono. So you use only left channel and then push the button, and then the channel becomes a mono channel, and then you put 2 in and you take that off, and then it becomes stereo channel all the way down.
And you have EQs, those nice AMEC EQ on it.
Exactly. So I still have all those, so if I want something in particular, then I can just wheel it out and put it in the room and plug in and do what I'm doing. That was also the mixer I used on that Theo Parrish track. I used that one.
But so this new console, you were thinking that you might actually end up installing it in your place?
Yeah, it would be installed. Once I take delivery on it, it would be installed. I think Aphex Twin has one now.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's where it's going. And to give you some history, because I don't know if you know that, and I can't remember Zal's first name right now. He used to work for Connie Plank.
I think Mark mentioned something about that.
And he built a console for Connie Plank. That's how he got into making consoles.
Yeah.
So by Mark linking up with Zal,
right,
it wasn't just like I'm looking for a console manufacturer. It was specifically that he worked and built a console with Connie Plank.
That's sweet.
That was specifically a thing. So he could have gone to, you know, anybody else and got this.